Okay, welcome back to the fourth video in this RenderMan and Rendering Passes tutorial series. So the previous video, we were looking at our Z-depth and our 2D motion blur, vector motion blur passes. So our Z-depth pass looked like this, right? So it was measuring the distance of an object from the camera. And we were using it for depth of field, right? So calculating depth of field. And also we were using it to simulate depth-based effects like atmosphere. Okay. We were also looking at our DPD time pass, which was our shows our vector motion blur, right? And it's using 2D vectors or colors to say which direction the surface is going to go and how fast it is, so that we can use it to simulate motion blur. Okay. So pretty easy to making these ones. They're really easy passes to create. And so it required very little setup on our part. So this next one is going to be the light groups. So before, we've been focusing on both the, these are the normal light render passes. So they're lighting and material interactions, right? And then we looked at our standard passes, which are non-light based ones, right? So we have our depth of field and our vector motion blur, our motion blur passes. And so these ones are going to be light groups. So light groups are going to be like the lighting passes, right? But they're going to be only for specific lights, right? So, or groups of lights, depends on how we group our lights up, right? So here's my environment light, so lighting that's coming from my environment image. Here's my lighting coming from my top-down light, which I call my key light in the scene. Here's my lighting coming from my rim light. And here's my lighting coming from my emissive object that's coming behind my character, right? Essentially the glow. And here's my normal beauty pass. And here you can see I'm merging them all together. And just like when we were doing the lighting channels or lighting render passes, the light group render passes, when we combine them together, if we get all of them that encompass all of our lights, then it should look no different than our beauty pass. Okay. You can see here I can come in and I can change essentially turn on and off different lights, right? So I can turn off my environment light, or I can dim it or brighten it or change color, right? Do the same thing with that top-down key light, right? Rim light, right? Turn that on and off, change its color, whatever I want to do. And then those emissive objects, right? So that emissive light, you can see the light that's spilling onto this character right here. It's a little less noticeable, but you'll notice it more inside the spine, right? So you can turn that off. Crank it up higher if you want to. In this pass, I actually included the actual emissive object as well as the emissive light. I could always isolate that, but I just chose not to, just for time's sake in this one. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into RenderMan and see how we can set this up. Okay, before we do that, let's take a look at a few other ones that aren't shown in that nuke file. So I have a couple, so I have my light groups. So I have my render passes dedicated just to specific lights. I also have a render pass that's dedicated to multiple lights, so multiple light groups, but excluding one of them. So you can see this is my lighting render, my rim lighting light group render pass, and here's my render pass without that light group, without the rim light group. Okay, I can do it based on objects as well. So you can see I can get rid of this object here, or I can show just the object, right? Just like how I can show just a light group or get rid of a light group, right? And then we can also focus on just the light coming from the lights, just the light coming from the emissive channel or emissive objects, and the emissive channel without the object, right? So there's pretty much any combination we can think of in terms of lights interacting with objects. We can create those in our render passes. But for this video, we're just going to focus on the light groups. Okay. So for my light groups, it's a pretty easy setup. First, I'm just going to go and clean this up a little bit because my scene got a little messy. I'm going to go ahead and create a new display, right? And I'm going to call this one my custom display. Or I just call it light groups. Let's call it light groups. Okay. right? And so there's two ways to create our light groups, right? We can create custom passes, right? So we can do this for, it doesn't have to be just for the light groups, it can be for anything. So I can go ahead and click this plus icon right here, and that's going to give me, let me define my own custom one. So I can call this one beauty, and call this one my key light, right? But you'll notice in here, it doesn't have my custom passes to, or my light path expression here, right? So I'd have to actually write that out again, which really isn't that big of a deal, but it's a little bit more tricky of a setup. So before I do that, let me go ahead and get rid of that one. Let's also go ahead and, oops, did the wrong thing. Let's go ahead and add that back in, custom, there we go. I'm going to select this and then subtract, there we go. All right, so let's first go ahead and add our default beauty pass into this custom pass. So I'm going to go ahead and add it over to my render display. Now I have this beauty pass underneath it. And here we can see our, essentially our lighting expression, right? So I can go ahead and create a custom. I'll call this one beauty key light or something like that, right? And I can actually go over here, copy this expression from this beauty pass, and I can paste it into here, right? And so if I try to render out this beauty pass, or this render pass, it'll give me the exact same render as my normal beauty pass, because I'm just copy pasting that expression. We'll take a look at the expressions later, but I just wanted to show this as one way you can create custom passes, including the light group passes. But we're not going to do it this way for this video. We're going to keep it simpler. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract that. Okay. So in order to create the other way you can create a light group pass is to just go ahead and add the render pass you want to have as the standard or for a base that you're going to apply to that light group. So for instance, if I just wanted, just like in this render over here, or these renders here, is I'm just doing a render, beauty render, right? So a beauty render pass, but just isolating it for specific lights, right? So it has all these interactions over here, all these lighting and material interactions, right? Combined into one, just like this one, but it's just isolated for specific lights, okay? So I'm gonna come over to my again. Okay, and so I'm going to go ahead and grab this beauty pass and add it to my display. I'm going to create a new node. Okay, and then down here we have this option right here that says LPE light group. So this lets us define a light group to isolate in this render. Problem is I don't have any light groups yet, right? I need to define them, right? So that's also very easy. So in my scene, I have 3 lights. I have a key light, right? So I should name this like a good artist. So I'll just call this one good key light. This one's going to be called rim light. And this one's going to be called environment lights. Okay. All right. So in order to add a light group, what we need to do is we need to come over to our attribute editor, come to our shape node, or shape attribute, yeah, our shape node. So the second tab, right? And this is where all our lighting settings are. And I'm going to come down to this where it says advanced. And under here, you'll find a option for light group. You can actually see I've actually created light groups. So I'm just going to delete that one for now. But down here, all you really have to do to create a new light group and assign this object is just to type in a name for it. So I'm just going to call this one, let's call this one group 1. I'm going to call it group 1. Okay, press enter. Okay, and so now there's a light group called group 1. So I'm going to come over here to my beauty pass, this one that I just created, click this drop down, and now you can see group 1 is in here. I have 2 other ones that I've already created because I didn't fully clean up the scene, but I'm going to start with group 1. Okay, so I'm doing this just on my key light. So I assigned the light group 1 to it. So now when and you'll see it renamed itself to say beauty underscore group 1. So super handy. So I'm going to come over to my open up image tool, and let's go ahead and click render. Okay, so my render has started, and you can see here's my beauty pass with all 3 of my lights in my scene set up. And here is my beauty pass with just that light group applied to it, right? So you can see the environment light and the rim light are not coming into, factoring into this. This is a little bit more complicated, having emissive objects or objects with a glow attribute. And I'll address that towards the end of this video. But for now, we're just going to kind of ignore it and pretend it's not there, just to keep this as simple as possible, because most of you guys probably aren't going to have objects with a glow attribute to it that you're trying to isolate. So I might actually, and then this motion vectors path is still showing up because I still have motion blur turned on, so I'll turn that off. And just for that, I'm just going to go ahead and hide the ring, just so we don't have to worry about that. So let's go ahead and click render again. Okay, so here's my beauty render. I hid the ring because I don't want to really deal with it just at this moment. And you can see here, here's my render pass without that ring, okay? Or without all the other lights. So it only has the key light group assigned to it or turned on, right? Because I just went in here and, or I called it light group 1 is what I called it. So I just came over to my AOVs tab, and you can see here I just assigned that group 1 to it, okay? Let's go ahead and add another light to it, right? So we don't have to have just one light per light group. We can add multiple lights. So I might go ahead and also add the rim light. So all I have to do is come over to my rim light, and my light group, I just need to name it the same light group name as my other one. So I'll just call it group 1 again. Okay. So I'll go ahead and click render. Okay, so we can see that I added that rim light to that light group. So we have both our key light and our rim light in this render, right? So here's just a key light, and here's that rim light. We just added both of them, just assigned group 1 light group to it, right? And we could probably use better names than group 1. I just used it as an example, right? So I might add in my render in Nuke, right? Each of these I just assigned like light group to each individual light, but that's a really simple setup. You might have a more complicated setup in your scene. So you might have like a group of lights for your characters, a group of light for like a background environment object. And so you could tag or bundle those lights together into a single light group if you want to, just like we're doing over here in this file right here, where we paired both the key and the rim light on these guys to be in one light group. Okay, so however you anticipate needing to isolate and separate lights, so you can kind of tweak it however you want to in compositing. You can set it up however you want to. Okay, so I'm going to come back over here, and I'm going to go ahead and just make each of my lights just like how I have in my Nuke file in that previous render, where I have each light has its own light group. So I'm going to select my rim light. I'm going to go ahead and give it rim light name. I'm going to select my key light, give it a key light light group, or key light group. That's what I'm going to call it. Take my environment light. Okay, let's go ahead and call this one environment. Okay, all right. And so now we need to go ahead and make sure we create render passes for each of those light groups. So let's go ahead, and I don't have a group 1 light group anymore because I reassigned these 3 lights to different light groups. I'm just going to click on this little drop-down menu. So it'll be the key group. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and grab my output display. So essentially on my render. And I'm going to go ahead and grab that beauty channel again. I want to add it and say create new node. I'm going to add another one. Create new node. Okay. And so these are going to be the rim and environment ones. So I'm just going to come in here, select rim, come here, select environment. Okay. So as easy as that. So we're going to go ahead and click render. And now you can see, here's my beauty pass, key light, rim light, and environment light, right? As simple as that. So however I want to organize and separate these, I could do so. So the next video will focus a little bit more on like what's going on with this expression right here. And in doing so, we can go ahead and start also making renders that are object-based instead of light-based, right? So if right now we're just doing light-based renders, in the sense that we're isolating a render based on a specific light, but we can also do that with object groups as well. Okay. So let's return to the problem that we had earlier with that nasty emissive object in the background. Okay, and so this is where we're probably going to be jumping ahead a little bit towards what's going to be covered in the next video. And it'll require a little more technical know-how to do something like this. But for our sake for this, it's not that bad. Okay, so let's go ahead and return to my render, and I'm going to go ahead and re-display that ring. So Shift H, okay. And I'm going to go ahead and send off the render. So let's go ahead and pause it. Okay, so you can see here in these renders that same exact object and the lighting from that object are showing up inside of my render, which is super annoying, right? Because if I combined all three of these together, this pink would just keep adding and adding on top of it. So this ring would end up becoming super, super bright, right? So isolating this isn't as emissive objects, so objects with a glow attribute, isn't as easy of a task, but it's still definitely very doable. So in order to do that, it requires a little bit of finagling this channel source, right? So every one of our renders is using something called a light path expression. And so if you add any of your renders to it, so let's go ahead and add a few custom renders to our render passes to our render. So I'll go ahead and do direct diffuse, direct specular, and let's do subsurface. Okay. So you can see here's my beauty pass. And let's see if we can zoom in a little bit on this, right? So here's my beauty pass. Yeah, there we go. Right? And then here's my direct diffuse, direct specular, subsurface, right? So you can see that that formula or that expression is changing a little bit based on what I'm trying to render, right? So what's happening is these little symbols and these variables represent different aspects of our render, right? So some of them represent what sort of lighting interactions are being viewed, whether they're reflections or they're so light bouncing off a surface, or if it's light penetrating a surface. What type of reflections, right? So whether it's diffuse or specular reflections. This symbol right here denotes how many times or what bounces we're looking at. So if we're looking at direct lighting or if we're looking at indirect lighting. And then this area over here is for light sources. So what light sources are we using, right? So we can change this formula up, and in the next video, I'll talk a little bit more about it. I'm not a expert by any means, but I'll talk a little bit about how we can manipulate this to some degree. But for right now, what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of this O. So this O stands for emissive objects. Essentially, anything that's emissive in your scene, if I get rid of that, then they will not calculate in the lighting for that render, right? So I'm not going to do it in this current render because this is my beauty render. Let's go ahead and add it to my light group renders. So I'll delete that. Anytime I'm doing editing the channel source, once I'm done editing, I'm going to press enter to fix it in. So go ahead and get rid of that O, and go ahead and get rid of that O. Okay. So let's go ahead and exit out that. And now let's go ahead and try rendering. Okay, so you can see here I have, before I deleted that O in my light path expression or in my channel source, right? You know, our emissive object was in here. But now you can see here that it's excluding lighting interactions coming from emissive objects, right? So I can get rid of the emission in those passes, right? So that's the easiest way to just get rid of that nasty part right there. And then what I could do is I could, if I still needed that kind of pass, right? So I still needed the emissive pass in there. Then what I could do is I could add a beauty pass. Let's actually go ahead and do that. So we're going to go ahead and let's get rid of these examples I was showing earlier. Don't need those right now. Okay. So I'm going to add another beauty pass to my custom render output. Okay. It's going to think about it for a second, so I'm going to have to pause it. Okay, so I added a new beauty node to my custom output, and I'm going to rename this one. So let's go ahead and rename this one only emissive. So only emit. Press enter. Okay, and in this one, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this part right here, the L in the brackets, right? So that's going to get rid of the lighting itself and only leave the lights themselves, and it's only going to leave the emissive part, right? Press enter. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and exit out that. And now let's go ahead and send off render. Okay, and so you can see that render where we got rid of the brackets L period bracket. This is what we ended up with, where we only have the O component from the lights coming in, right? So now we have our light groups without the emissive object in them, and then we have a pass with just the emissive information in it, right? So if you have emissive objects, you have something that's glowing in your scene, this is probably what you want to do if you want to isolate and control that emissive light, okay? So that should about do it for light grouping. That's about as complicated as it gets. Is you might have to tweak the uh, channel source or light path expression down here inside that pass. But for the most part, you just add the type of pass you want. So whether you want it to be a beauty pass or you want it to be a specific lighting interaction, add it over here. And then inside that channel or that render pass, you go ahead and choose from your drop-down menu your light group. And if you need to define your light groups, and if you haven't done that already, just select your object or your light, and then go under the Advanced tab, and then you just type in a name you want for your light group, and it should show up in there. Okay, so that's pretty much it. That's all there really is to light groups.